White woman calls the police to report a black mother, but the outcome that follows is unbelievable and will leave you completely shocked. The sun shone brightly in the community park of Atlanta as children ran and played under the watchful eye of their mothers. Emily was sitting on a bench, her gaze fixed on a group of mothers gathered around a woman she didn't know, Angela. The black woman, with a warm smile and contagious laughter, seemed to be the center of attention, surrounded by her children and other little ones who joined in. As she watched, a knot formed in her stomach. Why is she so different? Emily thought, feeling a growing discomfort. What should have been a relaxing day turned into internal turmoil. She recalled her own children, always neat, always in well-pressed clothes. Being around kids like that, what are they going to learn? She questioned herself, her mind feeding on a stereotype she knew deep down was unjust. But the feeling of discomfort persisted, as if a little voice in her head tried to convince her that Angela was not a good mother. "Emily, are you okay?" asked Beth, a longtime friend, interrupting her thoughts. "You seem so quiet." "Yeah, just observing," Emily replied, diverting her gaze to the ground. "That woman seems to have a different way of raising her kids." "Are you talking about Angela?" Beth asked, following her friend's gaze. "I know her by sight. She's a great mom, always so involved." "Maybe," Emily murmured, but doubt still lingered in the air. The discomfort transformed into an impulsive urge. I don't know. Sometimes I worry about what the kids are learning when they're so free-spirited." Beth frowned, realizing the direction of Emily's thoughts. "You're letting prejudice get to you, aren't you? We need to be more open-minded." Before Emily could respond, the sound of sirens pierced the air. She turned, her eyes widening. "What's happening?" she asked, anxiety rising. The police arrived, and within minutes one of them, Mark, a familiar face in the neighborhood, began questioning Angela. Angela's expression shifted, her smile fading as she tried to explain the situation. "I was just playing with the kids. They're safe, I promise," she said, her voice trembling but firm. But the crowd that formed around them didn't seem to share the same opinion. Some mothers, who had been chatting and laughing moments before, were now whispering among themselves, casting disapproving glances. Emily felt trapped. What she had initiated seemed to spiral out of her control. "I just wanted to protect my child," she thought, as guilt began to mix with justification. "Why did you call the police?" one woman in the crowd asked, her voice filled with indignation. "You shouldn't have done that." Emily hesitated, her heart racing. I thought something might be wrong," she replied, her voice wavering. "I just wanted to make sure the kids were safe." Mark, who was listening to the conversation, looked at Emily confused. "Emily, you need to understand that this situation isn't that simple. Angela is a dedicated mother." The tension in the air was palpable. Angela, with tears in her eyes, responded, "You can't just look at me and decide I'm a bad mother. I did nothing wrong." Emily, surrounded by social pressure and the gazes of neighbors, began to feel suffocated. She wanted to explain, to justify herself, but the words failed her. What she expected to be a peaceful day at the park had turned into a nightmare that left her exposed, vulnerable, and now completely isolated. "I just wanted to protect my child," Emily repeated, but this time the statement sounded empty, echoing in her mind like a distant call. As Angela tried to defend herself, the reality of what Emily had done began to weigh heavily on her shoulders. The laughter of the children, now distant, seemed like an echo from a simpler time that she had interrupted. Angela sat in a circle with other mothers in the support group, a warm and safe space, far from the judgment and hostility she had faced recently. The walls of the small community center were adorned with photos of past events, smiles of children and mothers in moments of joy. The voices were low, but the connection between them was palpable. Angela took a deep breath, trying to calm herself before sharing her story. "I just wanted my kids to play and have a normal day at the park," Angela began, her voice trembling slightly. "But instead, I was accused of being a negligent mother. It's like the fact that I'm a black mother makes everything more complicated." A woman named Lisa with curly hair and a supportive gaze nodded. "Unfortunately, this isn't new. I've been through something similar. Once, someone asked me if my kids were really mine, just because I'm white and they're mixed." The other mothers murmured in agreement, sharing expressions of understanding. The group united in a shared feeling of pain. Angela continued, "It was devastating. I just wanted to protect my kids, and now I feel like they're in danger. Not just because of the situation, but because of how people look at us. You're not alone. said an older mother with a firm look. "We need to support each other. Being here is a first step." Meanwhile, Emily, at home, felt increasingly isolated. Angela's words echoed in her mind. She had only tried to protect her child, but now realized that her actions could have caused irreparable harm. The weight of guilt began to bear down on her shoulders. "I just wanted to do what I thought was right," she murmured to herself, looking out the window. But was I really right? Determined to understand more about what had happened, Emily began researching racism and discrimination. She spent hours reading online articles, watching documentaries, and delving into stories of people she had ignored before. She found a video of a black woman talking about her experience of being a mother in a society that often questioned her capabilities. "People look at me and see a threat, not a mother," the woman said, and Emily felt a pang of pain upon hearing those words. That night, Mark discussed the incident with his daughter Sarah during dinner. He was trying to understand the repercussions of what had happened, but the conversation quickly took an unexpected turn. "Dad, what you did was wrong," Sarah said, her gaze firm and challenging. "Didn't you see how Angela was caring for her kids? You only believed your mom because she's white." Mark frowned, surprised. "I was just doing my job, Sarah. I needed to investigate the situation." "But didn't you question your mother? You just believed her without a second thought." Sarah raised her voice, frustration evident in her tone. "That's part of the problem, Dad. People need to be heard, not judged." "I understand that you're upset, but you don't know what was at stake," Mark replied, trying to remain calm. But his daughter's words hit him like a punch to the stomach. He found himself in a moral dilemma, forced to confront his own beliefs and how his profession intertwined with injustice. "You need to open yourself up to this, Dad. It's not just an isolated case. It's a matter of life and death for some people," Sarah said, her voice now soft but filled with the determination of someone who knew she was right. The words echoed in Mark's mind, but he didn't know how to respond. He felt torn, trapped between his role as a police officer and the new reality his daughter was showing him. The conversation ended in silence, but the tension in the air was palpable. He felt as if he were on the brink of change, yet still unsure how to take the next step. The fallout from the incident at the community park spread like wildfire. Social media buzzed with opinions, comments, and analyses. And Angela, once an anonymous mother, now found herself at the center of a social storm. Her phone wouldn't stop ringing, messages of support and solidarity flooding her inbox, while the hashtag #ShushJusticeForAngela gained momentum. Amid all this, she decided to join a support group, a space where her experiences of prejudice could be shared and understood. At the first meeting, Angela sat in a circle with other mothers. The atmosphere was thick with emotion, yet there was a sense of unity and strength. "I feel like I'm not just fighting alone. We're all in this together," said a curly-haired mother, tears in her eyes. "What happened to you could have happened to any one of us." Angela took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her words. "I just wanted to take my kids to the park. I never thought it would turn into a nightmare. It's like, because I'm a black mother, I have to constantly prove that I'm worthy of taking care of them." The other women nodded, recognizing the pain resonating with their own personal stories. "And now, because of a report, my life has turned upside down," she continued, holding tightly to a friend's hand beside her. Meanwhile, Emily felt increasingly isolated. The pressure from the community followed her like a shadow, and her neighbors, once so friendly, now looked at her with a mix of disapproval and distrust. At home, she tried to understand her actions, but guilt consumed her. "Why did I do that? I just wanted to protect my child," she murmured to herself while researching racism and discrimination online. Listening to the stories of others, she began to realize that her intentions did not justify her actions. One night, Emily decided to confront Mark, her husband, about the situation. "Did you see what happened? That woman didn't deserve to be treated like that," she exclaimed, her fervent tone catching Mark off guard. "I just wanted our kids to be safe. What was I supposed to do? Ignore it?" He was visibly agitated. "But what you did went way beyond what was necessary, Em. Look at what it caused. That woman is now fighting for her dignity." Their conversation grew intense, and Sarah, their daughter, entered the room, sensing the tension. "Dad, don't you see that this is about so much more than a child's safety? It's about how society views people of color." Sarah was at a boiling point. "If you can't understand that, then I don't know what more I can do to make you see." Mark felt challenged. He loved his daughter and wanted to understand her, but his beliefs were deeply rooted. "I'm just trying to do my job, Sarah. I'm not saying what happened to Angela is right, but you need to see the other side." Sarah's indignation was palpable. The other side? The other side is that she was treated like a criminal. This needs to change, and you're part of that system, Dad. The tension in the room was thick, reflecting the internal battle Mark faced. He realized that by staying neutral, he was perpetuating the problem. Meanwhile, support for Angela continued to grow. Local activists began organizing protests and campaigns on social media, uniting around her cause. Angela was becoming a prominent voice, and her story resonated in neighboring communities. "Together, we are stronger," she exclaimed at a meeting, her voice filled with emotion. "We won't allow this injustice to silence us." Angela's determination resonated with everyone. One of the activists, a man in a suit, raised his hand. "Angela, you've become... What can we do to help?" She smiled, feeling empowered by the support. "We need visibility. We need people to understand that this fight isn't just mine, but belongs to all of us. We will demand change, and we won't back down." The cycle of prejudice, activism, and redemption was just beginning, and both Angela and Emily, though on opposite sides, were about to be confronted with the truth of their actions and choices. The community was in upheaval, and what seemed like an isolated incident was becoming a symbol of a larger struggle. The tension in the Atlanta community was about to reach its boiling point. Angela, with tears in her eyes and firmness in her voice, decided she could no longer remain silent. In a tense meeting with her attorney, she declared, "Enough. I cannot allow this to continue. The injustice I faced isn't just mine. It's all of ours. I need to sue Emily and the police for racial discrimination." Her attorney, a determined-looking woman with a resolute expression, nodded as she took notes. "Do you understand what this means, Angela?" the attorney asked. "This won't just be a legal battle, it will be a public fight. People will get divided. Are you ready for that?" "I am. I have no choice. If we don't fight now, what will happen to our daughters? What will happen to future generations?" Angela replied, her voice rising. "I want them to grow up in a world where they don't have to worry about the color of their skin." On the opposite side of the city, Emily sat in her home, surrounded by piles of newspapers reporting the incident. She felt suffocated, her eyes fixated on a photograph of Angela being interrogated by the police. The echo of the headlines rang in her mind, and she knew her actions had repercussions that extended far beyond what she had imagined. Upon receiving a message from a neighbor praising her for defending the children, a wave of guilt washed over her. "How could I have done this?" she murmured, covering her face with her hands. "I wanted to protect my son, but what did I do? I caused pain to a mother who was just trying to care for her children." The night of the trial arrived, and the courtroom was packed. Angela walked in, head held high, determined to make her voice heard. The judge, a middle-aged man, looked at those present and said, "We are here today to discuss a case that involves discrimination and responsibility. I ask that everyone maintain respect in this room." The tension in the air was palpable, and the community's gazes were fixed on Angela and Emily. During the first hearing, the prosecutor stood up. "Your Honor, we ask that this court recognize that the complaint made by Emily not only brought stigma to Angela's life, but also to her family. The accusation of neglect was unfounded and motivated by prejudice." Angela stood up to testify. "When I saw the police arriving, my heart stopped. I knew something was terribly wrong. I have never neglected my children. Never. What happened to me could happen to any mother who doesn't fit the mold that some people insist we must follow." Emily sat in the front row, listening to Angela's words with a mix of anger and shame. When the defense began to speak, Emily's lawyer, a man in a well-fitted suit, stood up and said, "Angela is a mother, no doubt about it. But the issue here is Emily's perception. She was concerned for her child's safety. That concern cannot be criminalized." "But it wasn't about my child's safety," Angela retorted, her voice firm. "It was about the fear Emily felt because of the color of my skin. That is not a genuine concern. It is prejudice." The courtroom fell silent, and the tension rose as the judge paused to reflect. He finally turned to Emily, who was visibly distressed. "Ms. Emily, would you like to make a statement?" Emily stood up, her voice trembling. I didn't know. I thought I was doing the right thing, but now I see that I acted out of fear, and that fear blinded me. I am not here to justify myself, but to apologize. I didn't want this to happen." The judge nodded, recognizing the weight of Emily's words and the pain they caused Angela. As everyone prepared for the next step in the process, the truth began to emerge. The scars of the past and prejudice were laid bare before them, revealing that the struggle for justice and empathy was just beginning. Sarah was in her room, surrounded by posters of activism and social justice. She remembered the conversation she had with her father, Mark, and the indignation she felt upon hearing his defense of the police's actions on that fateful day in the park. The injustice Angela faced touched her deeply, and she knew she had to do something about it. With a determined sigh, she grabbed her phone and sent a message to a group of school friends who also cared about social issues. "Hey everyone, how about we organize a meeting about what happened to Angela? We need to do something about this." She pressed send and waited anxiously for the replies. Within minutes, her group began to mobilize. The idea of creating a student movement for racial equality started to take shape. That night, Sarah met with her friends in the living room. They discussed what they could do to give a voice to Angela and all the mothers facing discrimination. "We need to hold a peaceful protest at school," suggested a friend, Lucas. "We can make posters and talk about what happened." "Yes, and we should also invite Angela to speak," Sarah added, her heart racing with excitement at the idea. She needs to know she's not alone. With the support of her friends, they began planning an event that could be a turning point for the community. Meanwhile, Angela was in a support group with other mothers who also faced discrimination. They met weekly in a small community room where they could share their stories and experiences. That afternoon, the atmosphere was intense but supportive. Angela looked around, seeing faces that reflected pain and resilience. She sat down and began to speak. "I never thought something like this would happen to me," Angela said, her voice trembling. "I thought that living in a suburb like this, I would be free from prejudice. But the truth is I was judged by the color of my skin, by how I raise my children, and that hurts." A mother with curly hair and tired eyes, named Lisa, took the floor. "I went through the same thing. Once, in a store, I was followed by a security guard just for being black. And this isn't just about being a mother. It's about dignity. Our children deserve to grow up in an environment where they are accepted." Angela nodded, feeling the weight of those words resonate within her. "We need to do something. We cannot allow our voices to be silenced. What happened to me should not happen again. We must unite." The mothers began to get excited, sharing their own stories, each one more painful than the last. The support among them grew stronger, and Angela felt that this was her chance to become a voice not just for herself, but for all mothers facing similar challenges. The next day, seeing the news about the incident going viral, Emily felt alarmed. She couldn't understand how it had escalated to this point. She decided she needed to apologize to Angela in person. With a heavy heart, she drove to Angela's house, her mind filled with doubts and insecurities. "What if she doesn't forgive me? What if I only make things worse?" she thought. Upon arriving, Emily hesitated at the door, but with a deep sigh, she decided she needed to do this. Angela opened the door, and the look they exchanged was filled with conflicting emotions. "Emily," Angela said, her voice firm, "what do you want?" I came to apologize," Emily began, her voice trembling. "I acted impulsively and didn't think about the consequences. I'm so sorry for calling the police. I shouldn't have done that." Angela crossed her arms, her penetrating gaze fixed on Emily. "Do you think a simple apology will change what happened? You can't just take it back and expect everything to be okay. My son and I were exposed to your prejudice." "I know," Emily replied, guilt heavy in her words. "I truly didn't know. I'm trying to understand and learn. Please give me a chance to show that I want to be an ally." Angela shook her head, her heart still wounded. "Being an ally isn't easy, Emily. First, you need to listen and understand what that really means. I'm not just a victim. I'm a mother, a woman, and my struggle is the struggle of many others." The conversation grew tense, and Emily realized it would be a long and difficult road. Still, she was determined to change. "I want to help, Angela. I want to learn from you. Please teach me." Mark sat at the kitchen table, the dim light of late afternoon softly illuminating the space, contrasting with the storm of thoughts consuming him. His daughter, Sarah, had become an active voice in the fight against prejudice, leaving him feeling both proud and unsettled. He watched the young woman full of convictions and ready to fight for justice, wondering if he was doing enough. "Dad, you can't sit on the fence. What happened to Angela was unfair and you know it," Sarah said, passion igniting her voice. "People need to see that the police can be different. You can be different." Mark shook his head, trying to process her words. "I'm a police officer, Sarah. My loyalty is to my job, but I'm also your dad. And you're right, this situation is wrong. But what can I do? Speak up. Show that you care. If you don't do anything, how can you expect things to change? Sarah replied, her frustration evident. Angela is going through this, and you're in the middle of it. People need an example. Those words echoed in Mark's mind as he walked through the house, remembering the look of pain and indignation on Angela's face. He knew what had happened to her reflected the deep-seated prejudice in society, but as a police officer he always felt caught between his position and his personal beliefs. Now, the pressure was mounting, and the decision to speak out began to take shape within him. That night, Mark couldn't sleep. He got up and walked to the park where the incident had occurred. The silence of the night was oppressive, but for a moment he felt free to think. If he truly wanted to make a difference, he needed to take a step forward. The thought of Sarah encouraged him to rise and do something, but the fear of his colleagues' reactions paralyzed him. The next morning, as he prepared for work, he saw a news report about the incident with Angela on television. Images showed protests and citizens crying out for justice. Angela's voice echoed as she spoke about her experiences, and the indignation in her words hit him like a punch to the gut. He could no longer remain silent. Enough. I will speak out, he said to himself, deciding he could no longer ignore what was happening around him. The following day at the police department, Mark entered the briefing room and, with a firm voice, asked for the floor. I'd like to talk about the incident with Angela. We need to reflect on our actions and how they affect the community. We can't continue with the mindset that everything is okay. His colleagues' looks ranged from surprise to indifference. One of the older officers with whom he used to work crossed his arms. Mark, do you really think this is what we need? You're putting yourself at risk. Don't forget where you are. No, I'm speaking up for what's right, Mark replied, his voice resonating with intensity. We need to be better than this. We need to listen to the voices of the community and not just ignore them. As Mark spoke, he felt a wave of courage begin to wash over him. He wasn't just defending Angela, he was defending the dignity of everyone who was treated unfairly. He knew his position in the police was a privilege, but it was also a responsibility. Meanwhile, Sarah, who had overheard her father's conversation, felt inspired. When Mark returned home, she was waiting for him in the living room. You did it, Dad. I'm so proud of you, she said, her eyes shining. I still have a lot to learn, Sarah, but I know this isn't just about me. It's about all of us. Angela needs support, and the community needs to see that we stand with her, Mark replied, feeling that he had finally found a purpose. The climate in the community was shifting, and Mark was ready to be part of that transformation. He knew the road ahead would be difficult, but he was determined to face the challenges. He remembered Angela's words and the power her experiences could hold. The fight for equality and justice was not just a duty, it was a mission he now fully embraced. The atmosphere in the courtroom was tense, almost palpable. Chairs creaked under the nervous movements of the spectators, and the murmur of restless voices grew louder with each passing second. The judge, with his serious and authoritative gaze, repeatedly banged the gavel, trying to restore order. Mark, sitting in the front row, felt the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. He watched Angela, who appeared calm, yet her eyes betrayed the storm of emotions she was confronting. Angela, are you ready to testify? Her lawyer asked, trying to comfort H. She nodded slowly, taking a deep breath. Remember, you are the voice of many here. Your story matters. Mark glanced at his daughter Sarah, who was sitting beside him, her face reflecting a mix of concern and determination. Dad, why are we here? She asked, her voice low but firm. It's not right that she has to go through this just because she's different. I know, Sarah, but we need to hear both sides, Mark replied, even though he felt that his position as a police officer placed him in a moral dilemma. He wanted to believe he was there to seek justice, but doubt consumed him. The judge then called Angela to the witness stand. The room fell silent instantly, all eyes turning toward her. Angela rose, her heart racing, but she remembered the encouraging words she had received from her friends in the support group. Miss Angela, please recount the events of the day in question, the judge requested. Angela took a deep breath and began. I was at the park with my children, just like any mother would. We were having fun, when suddenly the police arrived. I was treated like a criminal when my only intention was to take care of my kids. Tears filled her eyes, but she pressed on. Ms. Emily reported me without a second thought, simply because I was different from her. This is not just painful, it's unjust. Mark watched every word. He remembered the first time he saw Emily, her insecurities manifesting in an act that now seemed so small, yet so significant. He felt that, regardless of his position, a mistake had been made. "Do you believe that Ms. Emily intended to hurt you?" asked the defense attorney. "I don't know. But what matters is that racism and discrimination are so deeply rooted that even a mother who should protect her children can become a threat. This is painful for me, and for all mothers who look like me," Angela replied, her voice steady. The eyes of the crowd turned to Mark, who felt increasingly guilty. He didn't know how to act. Sarah beside him held his hand, as if to say he wasn't alone. When it was Emily's turn to testify, the room felt divided in two. Mark's heart ached as he saw the woman he knew so well now in a vulnerable position. Emily entered, her eyes red, and looked out at the crowd. I never wanted this to happen," she began, her voice trembling. "I just wanted to protect my son, but now I see that my protection became an attack. I'm so sorry, Angela. I didn't know," the crowd murmured, some shaking their heads in disapproval, others showing empathy. Mark noticed that Sarah was tense, caught in an internal conflict. "Dad, this isn't just about Mrs. Emily. This is about all of us. We need to change." The tension hung in the air, and Mark battled against his ingrained beliefs. He had never thought to question his position in the police, but now everything was changing. He remembered how his own prejudices might have influenced his decisions. The judge banged the gavel again and the room fell silent. "It's time to deliberate," he declared, and the anticipation was almost unbearable. Mark closed his eyes for a moment, wishing the verdict would bring the truth to light, but fearing it wouldn't be enough to heal the wounds of the community. As everyone awaited the verdict, Mark felt that the future of his community was at stake. He looked at Sarah, who was staring at him with a mix of hope and determination. He knew that regardless of the outcome, the fight for justice would not end there. The sun began to set, painting the sky in orange and pink, when Angela stepped onto the stage set up in the center of the community park. People gathered, their expressions ranging from expectation to hope. It was an event honoring her courage, a celebration of the fight against discrimination that had come alive after her denunciation against Emily. The murmur of the crowd silenced as she took the microphone, her eyes shining with emotion. "Thank you all for being here today," Angela began, her voice strong but laden with apprehension. "When all of this started, I felt alone, as if I were fighting an endless battle. But seeing so many of you here, ready to unite for a greater cause, gives me hope." Applause resonated in the air, and Angela smiled, feeling empowered. Among the crowd, Emily watched with a mix of admiration and regret. Angela's transformation inspired her, but it also reminded her of her own mistakes. Beside them, Mark and Sarah were attentive, absorbing every word from the woman who had become a symbol of resistance. Angela continued, "This isn't just about me. It's about all of us. Every time we silence a voice, every time we allow prejudice to take hold, we are relinquishing our humanity. We need to strive to understand each other's experiences and create a space where everyone feels safe and valued." Her words resonated in Emily's mind. She recalled how she had acted impulsively, how fear had blinded her to the reality of Angela and her family. A pang in her heart made her feel the urgency to change, to become a true ally. After the speech, Angela stepped off the stage, surrounded by friends and supporters. Emily hesitated, but determination pushed her to approach. "Angela," she called, her voice trembling. When Angela turned, the expression of distrust was evident on her face. "Emily," Angela replied, her voice sharp. "What do you want?" I just wanted to say I'm sorry. I didn't know what I was doing. I wanted to protect myself, but I ended up hurting you and your family," Emily said, sincerity shining in her eyes. Angela assessed her for a moment, weighing her intentions. "Do you think an apology can fix what happened? You can't just take it back and say you're sorry. What I and my children went through cannot be erased." "I understand," Emily replied, her voice filled with emotion. "And that's why I want to learn. I want to understand your experience and how I can help. I'm not here to seek forgiveness, but to become an ally." Angela studied her, noticing the sincerity in Emily's eyes. "Being an ally isn't easy, Emily. It means being willing to listen, to learn, and most importantly, to act. Are you ready for that?" "Yes, I am," Emily said, determined. "I'm willing to do whatever it takes to change." As the two women conversed, Mark and Sarah approached. Sarah, her eyes shining, said, I read about what happened to you, Angela. It's so unfair. I want to help too. Can we do something at school to educate others about racism and empathy? Angela smiled at the young girl, hope rising in her heart. That's what we need, Sarah. Young people like you raising their voices and fighting for justice. You can make a difference. Mark, who had remained silent, finally interjected. Angela, I want to commit to listening more and acting responsibly. As a police officer, I recognize that I have a role to play in promoting equality. It starts at home and extends to my community. Angela nodded, realizing that change was beginning to happen. Even if slowly, we all can learn and grow, but we need to be willing to face our own shortcomings. Change begins with the willingness to listen and understand. The group dispersed, but the connection between them had become palpable. Emily knew the road ahead would be challenging, but she was determined to commit to the fight for justice and equality. The community event was not just a tribute to Angela, it was a new beginning for all of them. An opportunity to build a future where every voice was heard and respected. Angela sat at a rustic wooden table, surrounded by a group of mothers who, like her, had faced prejudice in their lives. The community event, which celebrated diversity and inclusion, was in full swing. She looked at the audience and saw familiar but also unfamiliar faces. Some people applauded, others just watched in silence, but there was a sense of hope in the air. The microphone was in front of her, and she was preparing to share her experience. I never thought I would become a voice for so many, Angela began, her voice strong but filled with emotion. When all of this started, I felt so alone, as if I were fighting a never-ending battle. But along this journey, I realized that my pain was not mine alone. It resonated in the stories of so many other women here. We are stronger together. The applause began to swell, and Angela spotted Emily among the crowd. The woman looked a bit hesitant, but her gaze conveyed a silent determination. Angela recalled the first time Emily had confronted her, the fear she had felt when accused of negligence. Now, here she was, willing to learn and seek redemption. Every time we remain silent in the face of prejudice, we allow it to grow, Angela continued, gesturing with her hands. We need to unite. We need to speak up. We need to support each other. Change starts here, in our community. After the speech, Angela was surrounded by mothers eager to share their own experiences. She realized that her role had shifted. She was no longer just a victim, but a leader, someone who could inspire others to stand up. Meanwhile, Emily stood off to the side, absorbing everything. She had signed up for a support group that promoted inclusion and diversity, but still felt like an outsider. Her mind was filled with questions. How could she help? How could she be an ally when her own story was intertwined with prejudice? Hi, can I join you? A familiar voice pulled her from her thoughts. It was Angela, approaching with a warm smile. I saw you over there and wanted to thank you for being here. I don't know what to say, Emily replied, her voice trembling. I just hope to learn. Learning is the first step, Angela said, sitting down beside her. We all have our flaws. The important thing is to recognize that and want to change. You've already taken a big step just by being here. Would you like to share what brought you to us? Emily hesitated, shame washing over her. I called the police. I thought I was helping, but I only caused more pain. And now, looking at all this, I realize I was so caught up in my own fears that I didn't see the truth. Angela paused, her expression gentle. I understand, often ignorance blinds us. But change begins when we allow ourselves to see beyond our own experiences. What have you been doing since then? I'm trying to learn about racism and discrimination. I'm joining groups, but I still feel lost, Emily confessed, the honesty in her voice echoing her pain. Feeling lost is a good place to start. You've already recognized the need for change, and that's crucial. But remember, you don't have to do this alone. We're all here to support each other. As they talked, Mark approached, observing the interaction between the two women. He noticed the change in Emily. There was a spark of determination in her eyes that hadn't been there before. He thought of the conversations he had with Sarah and how his view of the world was evolving. Mark felt increasingly proud of his daughter and Angela. Hey, Angela, he said, trying to catch her attention. Can I join you guys? Of course, Mark. We're just discussing how we can be allies and support change in our community, Angela replied. I'm here to learn too, he admitted, looking at Emily. I believe we need to unite and listen to each other. I want to be part of this change. And you already are, Mark, Angela affirmed, smiling. We all have a role to play. The important thing is that we're in this fight together. The conversation flowed naturally, bringing a new sense of hope and understanding. Emily felt that even though the road ahead would be long and challenging, she was finally on the right path. Change was beginning, and she was ready to be a part of it. In the warmth of the afternoon, the city of Atlanta pulsed with a tense, almost electric energy. Mark was in his office at the precinct, reviewing reports when a new allegation of police brutality broke on a local news channel. The images of a young black man being assaulted by police were visible on the screen, and the outrage in the community was palpable. He felt a knot in his stomach as he realized the situation was about to escalate further. The memories of the turmoil caused by the incident with Angela haunted him, along with the growing pressure to take a stand. How can this keep happening? Mark murmured to himself, closing his eyes as he paused to breathe. The weight of his position pressed down on him, but he knew he couldn't remain silent. He picked up the phone and called Angela, his voice a bit shaky, but determined. "Angela, we need to talk. I want to help." On the other end of the line, Angela hesitated. She had fought so hard to be heard and didn't want her voice to be diluted by Mark's guilt. "What do you plan to do, Mark? You're still a cop. How can I trust you?" Frustration was evident in her voice. "I know I may have failed in the past, but I'm willing to fight alongside you. I can't ignore what's happening anymore. What happened to you and your family changed me. I want to be an ally, not an adversary," he replied, feeling urgency swell within him. Angela sighed deeply. "If you really want to help, then join us. The community needs support, and we need you to use your voice to expose the truth. It won't be easy, but it's necessary." With his decision made, Mark left the precinct determined not only to defend the truths that had come to light, but also to confront the system he was part of. News of the new incident spread quickly, and soon the community was organizing a peaceful protest outside the precinct. He knew he needed to be there, even if it meant putting himself at the eye of the storm. Emily was at home, distracted, when she received a message from a friend about the protest. A sense of unease washed over her. She had tried to educate herself about racial issues, but the truth about her own family remained buried under years of denial. Looking out the window, she saw a crowd forming and decided she needed to go, even if it made her vulnerable. At the event, Mark stood beside Angela, listening to the shouts for justice and support that echoed down the street. He felt the strength of the community and the resolve in the voices calling for change. Next to him, Angela held a sign that read, "Enough of violence. Justice for all." "Mark, are you ready?" Angela asked, her gaze firm yet hopeful. "I am, and I promise I will do whatever it takes," he replied, his voice steady as the crowd gathered around them. Meanwhile, Emily blended into the crowd, observing people coming together for a cause she now understood was bigger than her own insecurities. With her heart racing, she approached a group that was discussing the need for changes in police policies. "Hi, I'm Emily," she introduced herself, feeling nervous. I want to help. How can I do that?" A woman next to her with a warm smile replied, "Start by listening. Hear the stories and learn from them. We need allies willing to educate themselves and stand with us." With each word, Emily began to realize that her role could be more significant than she imagined. She remembered the conversation she had with Angela, the pain and suffering that so often went unheard. In the heart of the protest, Mark and Angela exchanged glances, both aware that they were in a moment of transformation not just for themselves, but for the entire community. "Let's do this together, Angela," he said, determination shining in his eyes. "Yes, Mark. Together we can make a difference," Angela replied, feeling that the struggle that had begun as a cry of pain was now becoming a call to action. That day, the Atlanta community united in a peaceful movement, where the voices that had once been silenced finally gained space. Emily, alongside Mark and Angela, began her journey to understand and become a true ally. The path ahead would be long, but that first step in front of everyone was a sign of hope. Was